Cuts to a bustling coffee shop, a group of college students laughing and pointing. A young woman, Emma Watson, pulls her sleeves down quickly. A hand reaches out and gently touches the tattoo. The camera pans up to reveal an older man's face, his eyes wide with recognition, a single tear falling. Emma Watson pulled her long sleeves down, the fabric a familiar shield against the world. At 28, she had become a master of concealment, hiding the intricate tattoos that told the story of her military service. These weren't just designs. They were symbols of a brotherhood, of sacrifice and of battles fought in distant lands that most people would never understand. It had been 3 years since she returned home to Denver after 2 tours in Afghanistan. The transition from soldier to civilian was a daily struggle, far more challenging than any combat mission she had ever faced. Each day brought a new set of hurdles, finding a job, battling nightmares, and enduring the curious or judgmental stares when her tattoos were glimpsed. The local coffee shop was her refuge, a quiet corner where she could work on job applications that seemed increasingly out of reach. Her military experience, which was her entire life, was often a red flag for employers. Some worried she was unstable, while others questioned if a woman could handle workplace stress after being in a combat zone. As Emma approached the counter, the familiar whispers started behind her. A group of college students had caught a glimpse of an eagle's wing peeking from her sleeve, part of a larger tattoo for her unit. One of them snickered, muttering something about military wannabes and fake tough girls. The barista, Helen, a kind older woman who always served her with a warm smile, took her order. But today the shop was unusually busy, and Helen was training a new employee who seemed more interested in Emma's arms than the espresso machine. "What's all that ink about?" the trainee asked, his voice loud enough for others to hear. "Looks pretty intense for someone so small." Emma's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. She had heard countless variations of this question, a constant reminder that civilians saw her tattoos as fashion statements or rebellious choices, not as the solemn memorials they were. They had no idea each symbol represented fallen friends, successful missions, and a sisterhood forged in the crucible of war. She paid quietly and retreated to her corner, trying to ignore the stares and whispered comments. The college students, now openly pointed and laughed, joking about military groupies and questioning if her tattoos were even real. One of them, a loud young man, approached her table with a smirk. "Excuse me," he said, "but my friends and I were wondering if those are real military tattoos or just something you got to look cool. No offense, but you don't really look like soldier material." Emma's jaw clenched. She had survived rocket attacks and faced down enemies, yet these ignorant comments felt like a deeper cut than she ever expected. The young man was clearly performing for his friends, who were recording the interaction on their phones, likely for social media. "They're real," Emma said quietly, hoping to end the conversation. But the student pressed on, emboldened by his friend's laughter. "What unit were you in? What did you do?" he goaded. "Because honestly, you look more like someone who would work at a nail salon than someone who was in actual combat." The coffee shop grew quiet as people turned to watch. Emma felt trapped, knowing any defense would be filmed and twisted to make her look unstable. She knew firsthand that female veterans faced a different kind of skepticism. Just as she was about to respond, she noticed an older man at a nearby table quietly reading a newspaper. He was probably in his 60s, with the kind of posture that hinted at a military background. The man looked up and his gaze fixed on her arms, his expression shifting from casual interest to something like recognition. The college student kept taunting her, his voice getting louder. "Come on, just admit it," he said. "There's no way someone like you actually served in the military. You're probably just trying to get attention." Emma's hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the raw effort of controlling her rage. She thought of the friends she had lost and the hell she had endured to earn every single mark on her skin. These tattoos were not fashion statements. They were permanent reminders of the most important chapter of her life, a chapter that had cost her more than these spoiled students could ever comprehend. The old man slowly stood up, folding his newspaper with deliberate care. His movements had the measured quality of someone who had spent years in uniform, and the atmosphere in the coffee shop changed. The laughing students, still focused on Emma, were oblivious that their entertainment was about to take a dramatic turn. "Excuse me, son," the old man said, his voice carrying decades of authority. The student harassing Emma turned around, clearly annoyed. "Yeah? What do you want, old man?" he asked rudely. "We're just having a conversation here about fake military tattoos." The man ignored him and walked directly to Emma's table. His eyes were fixed on her arms, and she instinctively pulled her sleeves down further. But his gaze wasn't curious or judgmental. It was intense, almost urgent. "Ma'am," he said gently, "would you mind if I asked you about your ink? I think I might recognize some of those symbols." Emma hesitated, unsure if this was just another interrogation. But something in his respectful tone made her cautiously roll up her right sleeve a few inches, revealing more of the eagle design and part of a unit insignia. The moment he saw the full design, his face went completely pale and he took a step back as if he had seen a ghost. A stunned silence fell over the entire coffee shop. "Dear God," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "The 127th Mountain Infantry." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. It was her unit's specific insignia, something very few civilians would recognize. The 127th had been a specialized unit, operating in some of the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan on missions that were rarely discussed in official reports. The college student, impatient with the interruption, spoke up again. "Hey, are we going to continue this or what? I still don't believe she was actually in the military. This is probably all just some elaborate costume." But the old man didn't even seem to hear him. His attention was completely focused on Emma, and she could see tears forming in his eyes. He was studying not just her unit tattoo, but the other, markings visible on her arm. Memorial tattoos with dates and initials, coordinate numbers, and symbols only someone with intimate knowledge of military operations would understand. "The operation in Kandahar province," he said slowly, his voice thick with emotion. "October 15th, 2019. You were there, weren't you?" Emma felt her heart skip a beat. That date was seared into her memory forever. It was the day her unit walked into an ambush that claimed the lives of 4 of her closest friends and nearly killed her as well. The coordinates of that location were tattooed on her forearm, hidden beneath her sleeve with the names and death dates of the soldiers who never made it home. "How do you know about that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man was now openly crying, tears streaming down his weathered face. The entire coffee shop watched in growing confusion and concern. Even the college students had stopped their mocking, sensing a profound moment was unfolding that they couldn't grasp. "My son," the man managed to say through his tears. "Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, 127th Mountain Infantry. He wrote to me about that mission," he continued. "About how a female soldier in his unit saved half the squad when they were pinned down by sniper fire. About how she dragged wounded soldiers to safety under heavy gunfire and called in air support that got them out alive." Emma's hands began to shake as memories of that horrible day flooded back. She remembered Michael Rodriguez, a dedicated soldier and a natural leader who always looked out for his team. He had been one of the 4 who didn't make it home, killed by the same sniper fire that had left Emma with shrapnel scars and a purple heart she kept hidden in a drawer. He described the soldier who saved them, the old man continued, his voice growing stronger. A small Hispanic woman with incredible courage and tactical skills. He said she had unit tattoos and memorial ink for fallen comrades. He said she was the bravest person he had ever served with. The coffee shop was completely silent except for the hum of the espresso machine. Every person in the room was captivated by this unexpected revelation. The students who had been mocking Emma just moments earlier stared in shock, finally beginning to understand the gravity of their mistake. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she remembered Michael's face, his laugh, and the way he always kept morale up. She slowly rolled up both sleeves, revealing the full extent of her tattoos. The unit insignia, the memorial pieces, the coordinates, and the names of fallen friends covered her arms like a living history book. "Michael Rodriguez," she said softly, touching the tattoo on her left arm that bore his name and death date. "He was a good soldier and a good man. I'm sorry for your loss." The older man, Michael's father, reached out tentatively and touched the tattoo with reverence as if he were touching a gravestone. The coffee shop remained in stunned silence. "Mr. Rodriguez," Emma said, recognizing him now from photos Michael had shown her. "Your son saved my life more times than I can count. He was the best sergeant I ever served under." Mr. Rodriguez looked at her with eyes full of grief and gratitude. "He wrote about you in his letters," he said. "He called you ace, said you could shoot better than anyone and had nerves of steel. But he never told me your real name." "Sarah Martinez," she replied, extending her hand. The college student who started the confrontation stood awkwardly nearby, his face red with embarrassment. His friends had put away their phones and they were shifting uncomfortably, finally understanding they had been mocking a genuine war hero. The student cleared his throat nervously. I'm really sorry," he stammered. "I didn't know. I thought you were just trying to look cool or something. I had no idea you actually served." Emma looked at him with a mix of anger and pity. "The problem isn't that you didn't know," she said calmly. "The problem is that you assumed. You saw a young woman with tattoos and decided she couldn't possibly be a real veteran. You made judgments about something you know nothing about." Mr. Rodriguez continued to study the intricate artwork. "This one," he said, pointing to a complex design featuring mountains and a helicopter. Michael described this exact scene in one of his letters. He said you called in a medevac under impossible conditions and saved 3 wounded soldiers. Emma nodded, her own eyes filling with tears as she remembered that day. It had been one of her proudest and most terrifying moments as a soldier. As the weight of the moment settled, Helen, the barista, approached their table with fresh coffee and tissues. "These are on the house," she said quietly. "And ma'am," she added, looking at Emma, "thank you for your service." The words, which often felt hollow, carried genuine weight coming from Helen in that moment. Other customers began to approach their table, word spreading quickly about what had happened, and they wanted to apologize for their earlier stares. An elderly woman approached with tears in her eyes. "I lost my grandson in Iraq," she said. "Seeing how those young people treated you made me sick. You deserve so much better than that." A middle-aged man, a Vietnam veteran, also came over. "Different war, same homecoming problems," he said simply. "People don't understand what we've been through. They see the tattoos and the scars and they make assumptions." The college student was still hovering nearby, desperate to make amends. "Is there anything I can do to make this right?" he asked. "I feel terrible about what I said. I never should have assumed anything." Emma looked at him. "You want to make it right? Remember this feeling the next time you see someone who looks different from what you expect. Remember that everyone has a story." Mr. Rodriguez reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn photograph. It showed Michael with his arm around a smaller figure in combat fatigues, a figure Emma immediately recognized as herself. "He sent me this picture," Mr. Rodriguez said. "He wrote on the back that this was taken after a successful mission where you led the squad through enemy territory to rescue some local civilians. He said you were fearless." Emma stared at the photo, remembering the mission, the brief moment of joy they had felt after everyone made it back safely, feeling they had made a real difference. The atmosphere in the coffee shop had completely transformed from a scene of mockery to an impromptu memorial and educational session about the reality of military service. As the afternoon wore on, more customers came in and heard the story, approaching Emma and Mr. Rodriguez to offer their respect. The thing that struck Emma most was how many people had military connections they had never mentioned before. She and Mr. Rodriguez spent hours sharing stories about Michael and the other soldiers. He told her about Michael's childhood dreams of serving and how hard it was to lose him. The hardest part, he confessed, was not knowing exactly what happened that day. "The official reports are so formal and clinical," he said. "They don't tell you about the person your child was or how they lived their final moments." Emma understood his pain completely. She had struggled with survivor's guilt for years, wondering why she had come home when so many others hadn't. The therapy sessions had helped, but the weight of their deaths was something she carried every day. "Michael died protecting his soldiers," she told him. "When we were ambushed, he took charge and started organizing our defense. He was moving between positions, checking on wounded soldiers and coordinating our response. He drew enemy fire away from the rest of us." She paused, the painful memories overwhelming her. He could have stayed in cover, but he saw that one of our youngest soldiers was trapped in the open. Michael ran out under heavy fire to drag him to safety. That's when the sniper got him. Mr. Rodriguez was crying again, but these were different tears, a mix of pride and grief. That sounds exactly like something Michael would do, he said. Even as a boy, he always protected smaller kids from bullies. The college student who had started the confrontation was still there, sitting alone at a distant table, researching military service on his phone. Finally, he worked up the courage to approach Emma and Mr. Rodriguez again. "I've been reading about the 127th Mountain Infantry," he said hesitantly. "I had no idea how dangerous that deployment was." Emma looked at him with less hostility now. He was making an effort to educate himself instead of just offering empty apologies. "Most people don't know," she replied. "The media doesn't usually cover the smaller unit operations, especially the ones that go wrong. We lost a lot of good soldiers on missions that never made the news." The student shifted nervously. "I keep thinking about what I said to you about not looking like soldier material. I realize now how ignorant that was. I'm studying business administration, and I've never faced anything more dangerous than a difficult exam. I have no right to judge anyone who's actually served their country." As closing time approached, Helen the barista made an announcement to the remaining customers. "I want everyone to know that this young woman is welcome in this coffee shop anytime, and her drinks are always on the house. Anyone who wants to disrespect our veterans can find somewhere else to get their coffee." The small gesture meant everything to Emma. After years of feeling like an outsider in civilian life, it was a public acknowledgement of her service. Mr. Rodriguez reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a military challenge coin from the 127th Mountain Infantry that Michael had sent home shortly before his death. Michael wrote that these coins were given to soldiers who showed exceptional courage and leadership, Mr. Rodriguez said. He said, "I want you to have this. You've already earned it, and I think Michael would want you to carry it." Emma accepted the coin with trembling hands. Challenge coins were sacred in military culture, tokens of respect and brotherhood. To receive one from a fallen comrade's father was an honor beyond measure. "I don't deserve this," she protested. "Michael was the hero that day, not me." "You both were heroes," Mr. Rodriguez replied firmly. "Michael wrote about how you kept fighting even after you were wounded, how you coordinated the evacuation that saved the rest of the squad. You brought my son's body home, Sarah. That means everything to our family." The coffee shop was nearly empty now, with just a few customers remaining. The college students had left hours ago, but not before each of them had personally apologized and thanked her for her service. As they prepared to leave, Mr. Rodriguez asked Emma if she would be willing to visit his family. Michael's mother and sister had heard about the soldier who had tried so hard to save him and wanted to meet her in person. "They need to know that Michael didn't die alone," he explained. "They need to hear from someone who was there, who knew him as a soldier and a friend." Emma agreed, knowing the meeting would be emotionally difficult but also healing for all of them. She gave Mr. Rodriguez her contact information and promised to call within the next few days. As they walked out of the coffee shop, Emma felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. The encounter, though painful at first, had connected her with people who understood and appreciated her sacrifice. She looked down at the challenge coin in her hand and thought about Michael Rodriguez. Somewhere, she hoped he was proud of how his father had stood up for her and honored their shared service. 3 days later, Emma found herself standing on the front porch of a modest suburban home, clutching the challenge coin. She had changed her clothes 3 times that morning, unsure of what to wear. Finally, she had settled on a simple blue dress that covered most of her tattoos, while still allowing the unit insignia on her forearm to show. Mrs. Rodriguez answered the door with red-rimmed eyes and immediately pulled Emma into a fierce hug. She was a small woman with graying hair and Michael's same kind eyes, and the resemblance between mother and son was immediate. "Mija," Mrs. Rodriguez said through tears, using a Spanish term of endearment. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for being there with my Michael." Inside, the walls were covered with photographs of Michael's life, from a baby to a soldier. Emma recognized some of the military photos, including group shots that included her. Michael's sister, Elena, was also there. She was Emma's age and shared her brother's strong jawline and determined expression. Elena had been studying to become a nurse when Michael was killed and had struggled with depression and survivor's guilt, even though she hadn't served herself.